My fiancée disappeared for 3 weeks to reconnect with her ex, then returned expecting our wedding to continue as planned, so I let her think it would, and what I discovered about her real plan destroyed everything she thought she controlled. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. 6 months before our scheduled wedding, Lily Donovan sat across from me at our kitchen table, fidgeting with her engagement ring like it was burning her finger. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and suddenly she needed space to figure things out. The words hit like ice water. "It's not about him," she insisted when I asked about Marcus, her college ex who's recently moved back to town. "I just need time to be sure about us before we make this permanent." She packed a bag that night, promising to call in a few days. 3 weeks of silence followed. No texts, no calls, no responses to my increasingly desperate messages. Her social media went dark except for vague posts about finding herself in important decisions. Meanwhile, mutual friends reported seeing her around town with Marcus, holding hands, looking happy. When she finally returned, Lily acted like nothing had happened. She walked into our apartment with coffee and croissants, talking about wedding flowers and guest lists, as if she hadn't vanished for 21 days. "I needed that break," she said, settling onto the couch like she'd never left. "Now I'm sure about us. The wedding can proceed as planned." Something cold settled in my chest watching her casual confidence. She expected me to be grateful she's chosen me over her ex. But I'd spent 3 weeks in hell. "And she thought a bag of pastries would fix everything?" "Where were you staying?" I asked carefully. "With girlfriends. Moving around, I needed space from everything familiar." She avoided eye contact, straightening wedding magazines that didn't need straightening. The lie hung between us like smoke. I'd called her closest friends, none of them had seen her. That night, while Lily slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. If she could disappear and investigate her feelings, I could investigate what she's really been doing. The woman I'd planned to marry had either developed an impressive talent for deception, or I'd never known her at all. The next morning, I called Lily's parents. Surely they'd be concerned about their daughter's behavior and want to discuss postponing the wedding until we worked through this crisis. "Owen, sweetheart," her mother Patricia cooed through the phone, "Lily mentioned you were having some doubts about the wedding. It's completely normal for couples to need space before such a big commitment." My blood turned to ice. "I'm having doubts. She's the one who disappeared for 3 weeks. Sometimes when one partner pulls away, the other can become clingy and paranoid. Lily's just protecting her mental health. Taking some time. You should proud of her self-awareness." "Did you know where she was staying?" A pause. "Too long. With friends. She needed support during this difficult time." "Which friends, Owen?" "I don't think interrogating her family is the healthiest way to start your marriage. Maybe you should consider couples counseling to work through these trust issues." I hung up shaking. Trust issues? They've already flipped the narrative. Lily's abandonment had become my paranoia. Her lies had become my accusations. Her family was protecting her choices while painting me as the problem. But I wasn't done. If Lily's parents wouldn't tell the truth, I'd find it myself. That weekend while Lily visited her sister, I systematically documented everything. Screenshots of her social media posts with timestamps showing when she was finding herself versus when friends had seen her with Marcus. Phone records from our shared plan showing hundreds of texts to his number during her break. Credit card statements revealing charges at restaurants and hotels I'd never been to. Monday morning, I presented the evidence to our mutual friend group during what was supposed to be a casual lunch. "Look at the timeline," I said, spreading printed screenshots across the table. "She claims she was staying with girlfriends, but none of you saw her. Meanwhile, she's texting Marcus constantly and charging romantic dinners while telling me she needs space from relationships." Our friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah, Lily's college roommate, spoke first. "Owen, this feels like you're stalking her. People deserve privacy, even in relationships." "Privacy or lies? Maybe she was protecting your feelings," offered James, who's introduced us originally. "If she needed to process old feelings before committing. Isn't it better that she handled it privately rather than dragging you through emotional confusion? By lying about where she was? By making me think I'd done something wrong? You're acting obsessed," Sarah said firmly. "Lily came back and chose you. Why can't that be enough?" I stared at them in disbelief. The evidence was clear. Lily had spent 3 weeks with her ex while lying to me about it. But our friends saw my investigation as the problem, not her deception. "She chose me after testing both options," I said. "Don't you see how wrong that is?" "She chose you," James repeated. "That's what matters." I gathered my papers, hands shaking. Even with proof, they prioritized loyalty over truth. Lily's narrative had already taken root. She'd needed space. I was being paranoid, and questioning her choices made me controlling. Walking home, I realized I was completely alone in seeing the betrayal. Everyone else saw a woman making a mature decision about her future, and a man who couldn't accept her choice. But I'd seen something else in those phone records, a pattern that suggested this wasn't impulsive. The frequency and timing of texts indicated planning, coordination, strategy. Lily hadn't just reconnected with Marcus during a moment of pre-wedding panic. This had been orchestrated, but proving it would require more than social media screenshots and phone bills. I needed to know exactly what she'd been planning, and whether the wedding was part of some larger game. That night, I watched Lily sort through wedding recipes, humming contentedly like the last month had never happened. She looked genuinely happy, genuinely excited about our future together. Either she was an incredible actress, or she's completely compartmentalized her betrayal. The venue coordinator called today, she said, not looking up from the responses. We need to finalize the menu by Friday. Shouldn't we talk about what happened first? She sighed, still not meeting my eyes. I told you I needed space, and now I'm sure about us. Why do you keep bringing up the past instead of focusing on our future? Because the past determines whether we have a future. Oh, and she finally looked at me, and her expression was patient but tired. Like she was explaining something obvious to a child. I chose you, we're getting married in 4 months. Can that be enough? But it wasn't enough. Not when I'd spent 3 weeks wondering if she was dead or if I'd somehow driven away the woman I loved. Not when she's returned acting like my pain didn't matter. And definitely not when everyone around us supported her right to lie while questioning my right to ask for truth. I needed to know what I was really committing to when I said I do, because the woman sitting across from me wasn't the same person I'd proposed to 8 months ago. This version of Lily was capable of calculated deception and emotional manipulation. She'd disappeared with no explanation, lied about where she's been, and convinced everyone that my desire for honesty made me the villain. If she could do all that during our engagement, what would marriage look like? The next evening, I followed Lily when she said she was going to her sister's house for dinner. Instead, she drove to Marcus's apartment complex on the other side of town. I parked 3 blocks away and walked back, heart hammering against my ribs. Their reunion wasn't romantic, it was businesslike. Through the ground floor window, I watched them sit at his kitchen table with papers spread between them, discussing something intensely. Lily took notes. Marcus pointed at documents. They looked like they were negotiating a contract. When Lily's phone rang, she glanced at the screen and showed it to Marcus before declining the call. My call, they both laughed. I crouched behind a hedge for 2 hours, photographing everything I could see through the window. The papers appeared to be apartment leases and financial documents. At one point, Marcus pulled out what looked like a wedding invitation, not ours, but someone else's. They studied it together. Then Lily pointed at specific sections while Marcus nodded and made notes. When Lily finally left, she hugged Marcus at the door, a long, intimate embrace that looked nothing like goodbye and everything like see you soon. I followed her home at a distance, my mind racing. The meeting hadn't been romantic, but it had been secretive and clearly important. They were planning something together. Something that involved financial documents and wedding invitations. My stomach churned with possibilities. None of them good. Back home, Lily greeted me with a kiss and asked about my day, like she'd spend the evening exactly where she'd claimed to be. How's your sister? I asked. Good, stressed about work, but good. We ordered Thai food and watched that show she's obsessed with. Another lie, delivered with perfect casualness, but this time I had photographs proving exactly where she's been and who she'd been with. The question was what to do with that information. The photographs burned in my phone like evidence of a crime I couldn't yet name. For 3 days, I carried them around while Lily planned our wedding with enthusiastic efficiency, chatting about centerpiece and seating charts like she hadn't spent the previous evening in secret meetings with her ex. I needed to understand what those documents meant, but accessing them would require getting close to Marcus. Too close. The smart move would be waiting, watching, gathering more evidence. But patience felt impossible when every wedding decision Lily made might be part of some elaborate deception. Friday night, Lily announced she was having drinks with her bridesmaids to discuss dress fittings. Perfect cover. I drove to Marcus's apartment and parked in the visitor lot, then spent an hour studying the building's security. No cameras in the stairwells. Keycard access only for the main entrance, but residents often propped open the side door for deliveries. At 9 p.m., a pizza delivery created my opening. I slipped inside behind the driver and climbed to the 3rd floor, pulse hammering in my throat. Marcus's apartment door had a standard lock pickable with enough time and the right tools. But I'd brought neither. The hallway window overlooked the fire escape, 20 feet of rusty metal between me and answers. 3 stories above concrete. I'd climbed harder routes at the gym, but never with this much at stake. The fire escape groaned under my weight, each step echoing like gunshots in the quiet evening. Marcus's living room window was unlocked, careless in a 3rd-floor apartment, but lucky for me, I photographed everything before touching anything. Paper scattered across his coffee table, Laptop open to email. Phone charging on the kitchen counter. The documents from their meeting were spread across his dining table like evidence in a war room. Apartment leases for a place across town, dated to begin 2 weeks after our wedding. Bank statements showing joint accounts I'd never heard of. Insurance paperwork listing Lily as beneficiary on policies worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. My hands shook as I photographed each page. The timeline was becoming clear. Lily and Marcus weren't just rekindling romance. They were planning a life together that would begin immediately after she married me. The insurance policies suggested something even darker. They needed me married to her before their plan could work. But the most damning evidence sat in a manila folder labeled Project Wedding. Inside, copies of our venue contracts, guest lists, vendor agreements, and a detailed timeline. But this wasn't wedding planning, it was wedding hijacking. Marcus had researched every aspect of our event, down to the catering staff schedules and security protocols. My blood turned to ice as I read their handwritten notes. Venue access through service entrance. Catering uniforms ordered. Guest distraction timing 4:30 p.m. during cocktail hour. Photography equipment hidden in van. They were planning to crash our wedding. But why? The answer lay in the final document, a detailed breakdown of wedding gifts, estimated values, and guest financial information. They weren't just planning to disrupt our ceremony, they were planning to rob our guests. A car door slammed in the parking lot below. Through the window, I saw Marcus walking toward the building entrance, takeout bag in hand. I had maybe 3 minutes before he reached his apartment. I grabbed the Project Wedding folder and shoved it inside my jacket, then climbed back through the window onto the fire escape. The rusty metal screamed under my weight as I descended, each step echoing off the building walls like gunshots. "Hey," Marcus's voice carried from his apartment window 3 stories up. "Someone's on the fire escape." I dropped the final 8 feet to the alley, landing hard on concrete that jarred my teeth. Marcus appeared at his window, phone in hand, but I was already running toward my car parked 2 blocks away. My hands shook so violently I could barely start the engine. In my rearview mirror, I saw Marcus emerge from the building, scanning the parking lot with his phone pressed to his ear, calling the police probably, or calling Lily. I drove home through back streets, paranoia making every passing car look like pursuit. The folder on my passenger seat contained proof that my fiancée and her ex weren't just planning infidelity, they were planning a coordinated crime using our wedding as cover. But I'd also just committed breaking and entering to get it. If Marcus called the police, I'd be the one facing charges while Lily played the victim of her unstable fiancé's escalating stalking behavior. At home, Lily was curled on the couch in pajamas, wedding planning books scattered around her, like she'd spent the evening exactly where she'd claimed to be. "How are the bridesmaids?" I asked, testing, exhausting. Sarah can't decide between navy and midnight blue, and don't get me started on Jessica's opinions about hemlines. She looked up with a tired smile. "How was your night?" "Quiet, watched the game." She stretched and yawned. "I'm exhausted. Early morning tomorrow, final dress fitting." I nodded and headed to the bathroom, where I locked the door and examined the stolen documents under harsh fluorescent light. The evidence was devastating, detailed plans for a coordinated robbery, timelines showing months of preparation, and financial documents proving Lily and Marcus had been planning this since before she's proposed her break. But it was also stolen evidence that would never hold up in court. Worse, Marcus knew someone had broken into his apartment. He'd probably already warned Lily, which meant they'd accelerate their timeline or abandon the plan entirely. Unless I could find another way to expose them. The next morning, Lily left for her dress fitting with unusual nervousness, checking her phone constantly and avoiding eye contact. She knew Marcus had called her, and now they were both aware their plan had been compromised. I waited 30 minutes, then called the wedding venue. "This is Owen Matthews, getting married there next month. I wanted to confirm our security arrangements, of course." "Mr. Matthews, we have standard venue security, but you requested additional measures for the cocktail hour." Very wise for a guest list with so many high net worth individuals. My stomach dropped. "Additional measures?" "The private security team you hired through Marcus Blackwood. They will be stationed throughout the venue during your event, with special attention to the gift display area and parking lot." Marcus had convinced our venue that I'd hired additional security that he would control. They'd have access to every part of the venue, every guest, every valuable gift brought to celebrate our marriage. "Actually, I need to review those arrangements. Can you send me the security contract?" "Certainly. Mr. Blackwood said you might want to review the details closer to the date." The contract arrived in my email within an hour. Marcus's company, apparently a legitimate security firm, would provide 6 guards for our wedding at no charge, claiming it was a promotional opportunity to showcase their services to our affluent guest list. But the contract gave his team unprecedented access. They could enter any area of the venue, approach any guest, and remove any items deemed security risks. It was a robbery disguised as a wedding gift. I printed the contract and studied every clause, looking for a way to cancel without raising suspicion. But Marcus had been clever. The agreement was signed with my forged signature and dated 3 months ago. Long before Lily's break, canceling now would require explanation, and any explanation would reveal how I'd learned about their plan. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily: running late, dress needed major alterations, home by 6. Another lie, through our shared credit card account. I could see she'd made purchases at an office supply store and electronics retailer that morning. No bridal shop charges anywhere. She was buying equipment for their plan, while using dress fittings as cover. I spent the afternoon researching Marcus's security company. Digging through business registrations and client reviews, the company was real but small, with only 3 employees and a handful of contracts for minor events. Nothing approaching the scale of security our wedding would require. But Marcus's business partner was interesting: David Chen. Convicted of embezzlement 8 years ago, now working in private security consulting, their client list included several high-end events that had experienced mysterious thefts during the celebrations. The pattern was clear. Marcus and David used their security company as cover to rob wealthy clients at their own events. With inside information, providing perfect targeting and timing, Lily's job was to feed them guest information and ensure venue access. But they needed her married to me first. My family connections and financial background provided credibility their previous targets had lacked. A wedding with my guest list would be their biggest score yet. The front door opened at 4:30 am, 2 hours earlier than Lily had promised. She walked in carrying shopping bags instead of a dress box, confirming her lie about the fitting. "How did it go?" I asked. "Perfect. Just minor adjustments to the hem." She avoided eye contact, bussying herself with putting away her mysterious purchases. "The seamstress said it would be ready next week." "That's great. I called the venue today to confirm some details." She froze, back turned to me. "What kind of details?" "Security arrangements. Apparently we hired additional guards through someone named Marcus Blackwood." A silence stretched between us. When Lily finally turned around, her expression was carefully neutral, but her hands were shaking. "I don't know anything about that." "Maybe your mother arranged it. She's been worried about having so many expensive gifts on display." Another lie. My mother hadn't been involved in any wedding planning beyond guest list suggestions. "Strange that the security company would use the same name as your ex-boyfriend." "It's a common name," Lily said, but her voice cracked slightly. Maybe I should call the venue to clarify, make sure there wasn't some mistake with the paperwork." "Good idea. We wouldn't want any confusion about who has access to our wedding." She nodded and retreated to the bedroom. Phone already in hand. Through the thin walls, I heard her urgent whispered conversation, too muffled to understand but clearly panicked. I had maybe hours before they realized their plan was completely blown, hours before they either accelerated their timeline or disappeared entirely. Either way, I needed help, but calling the police meant explaining how I'd discovered their plan, which would expose my own crimes. Calling the venue meant canceling security arrangements I'd never actually made, which would require explanations I couldn't give. I was trapped by my own investigation, holding evidence of a massive crime I couldn't report without confessing to breaking and entering. Marcus and Lily had played this perfectly. Even their contingency plans had contingency plans. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Owen Matthews." "Yes, this is Detective Torres with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to discuss some concerns about your wedding security arrangements." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of concerns?" "We've been investigating a series of thefts at high-end events around the city. Your venue contacted us about unusual security requests that match patterns we've been tracking. Can you meet us at the station this afternoon?" Lily emerged from the bedroom, face pale. She'd heard enough of the conversation to understand everything was collapsing. "I'll be there in an hour," I told Detective Torres. After hanging up, Lily and I stared at each other across our living room like strangers. 4 years together, 8 months engaged, and I was looking at someone I'd never really known. "How long?" I asked. She sank onto the couch. "All pretense finally abandoned. Since college, Marcus and I never really broke up. We just went long distance when his business expanded here. The break wasn't about choosing between us. No, it was about coordinating the final details without you getting suspicious." Her voice was flat. "Emotionals is, you were getting too involved in wedding planning? We needed space to finish preparations, the insurance policies. You were planning to kill me after the wedding." She looked genuinely shocked. "Kill you?" "Owen, no, we're not murderers." "Then why the life insurance? Divorce settlement. With those policies and the wedding gifts, I'd walk away with enough to disappear permanently. Clean break, no messy custody battles or asset disputes later." I stared at her, trying to process the casual calculation. "You plan to marry me, steal from our guests, then divorce me and disappear. You'd never have suspected the robbery was inside coordination. Just bad luck that thieves targeted our wedding. I'd comfort you through the trauma, then gradually grow distant. Natural relationship dissolution after shared tragedy. The sophistication was breathtaking. They planned every emotional manipulation, every narrative detail, every possible contingency except one, me investigating instead of accepting her lies. Why me specifically? Your family guest list, tech executives, finance professionals, your uncle's political connections. 60% of attendees worth over $5 million individually, our biggest score by far. My phone buzzed with another call from Detective Torres, Mr. Matthews. We need to discuss this urgently. There's been a development. What kind of development? Marcus Blackwood was arrested an hour ago attempting to purchase additional surveillance equipment. He's claiming you hired him for legitimate security services, but the equipment purchase suggests otherwise. Relief flooded through me. They'd caught Marcus in the act, which meant I might not need to explain how I'd discovered their plan. I never hired any security services. We suspected as much. Can you identify the woman he's been working with? We have surveillance footage of their meetings. But we need positive identification. I looked at Lily, who was listening to every word with growing panic. Yes, I can identify her. Bring any evidence you have. Documentation, communications, anything that shows the scope of their planning. After hanging up, Lily stood abruptly. I need to pack. The police will be looking for you within hours maybe. Or maybe I disappear and Marcus takes full responsibility. Jilted ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept rejection. Plan revenge against new fiancé. He has priors for financial crimes. I'm just the innocent victim caught between two men, even facing exposure. She was calculating escape routes. David Chen will back your story. She smiled for the first time since I'd confronted her. David thinks Marcus planned this without telling him. Plausible deniability all around. Except for the joint bank accounts, the apartment lease, the months of coordination. Her confidence faltered. You have been busy. I had a good teacher. You showed me how much someone can hide when they are motivated. I walked to the kitchen and retrieved the project wedding folder from where I'd hidden it behind the refrigerator. This is going to the police along with every photo, every document, every piece of evidence I've gathered. You broke into his apartment, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. That evidence is inadmissible maybe, but it led police to investigate legally. And now they have Marcus in custody with surveillance equipment he can't explain. Your plan is finished. She stared at the folder like it contained her death sentence. What do you want? I want you gone. Hack whatever you can carry, and leave. Don't contact me. Don't contact my family. Don't even think about showing up to explain this to anyone we both know, and in exchange I tell the police you were another victim. Marcus manipulated you during emotional vulnerability, took advantage of pre-wedding stress, convinced you to help him with promises he never intended to keep. It was more mercy than she deserved, but I wanted her out of my life permanently. Criminal prosecution would mean trials, testimony, years of continued contact. This way, she disappeared forever. You'd lie to protect me? I'd lie to protect myself. Having my judgment questioned for 4 years because I nearly married a criminal isn't appealing. She nodded slowly, understanding the transaction. The wedding, cancelled. I'll handle the explanations. What will you tell people? That my fiancé decided she wasn't ready for marriage and left town to figure things out. Close enough to truth. An hour later, I watched Lily load 2 suitcases into her car and drive away. No dramatic goodbye, no tears, no promises to explain everything someday. She'd been planning to disappear after robbing our wedding anyway. This just moved up her timeline. At the police station, Detective Torres reviewed my evidence with impressed professionalism. This is extremely thorough documentation. Mr. Matthews, how did you know to investigate? She lied about where she's been during a 3-week break. When someone you're planning to marry lies about something that's significant, you pay attention to other inconsistencies, smart instincts. This investigation prevented what would have been a 7-figure theft from some very prominent people. What happens to Marcus? With this evidence and the surveillance equipment purchase, he's looking at federal charges. Multiple counts of conspiracy, fraud, theft by deception. 20 years minimum. I felt nothing hearing Marcus' fate. No satisfaction, no revenge, just exhaustion and relief that it was finally over. The next morning, I began the process of canceling a wedding. Vendors were surprisingly understanding when I explained that my fiancé had decided she wasn't ready for marriage. Most had dealt with cold feet before. 3 weeks later, I moved to a different apartment across town. Clean slate, no shared memories, no places where Lily's ghost could ambush me with what-if thoughts. My family asked minimal questions, accepting my explanation that sometimes people realize they're not compatible before making permanent mistakes. My friends were more curious, but eventually stopped asking when it became clear I wasn't discussing details. 6 months later, I ran into Mia Turner at a coffee shop downtown. She'd been one of Lily's bridesmaids, someone who'd always seemed more interested in my attention than friendship required. When I heard about you and Lily, I'm so sorry. It worked out for the best. She told everyone you became paranoid and controlling, that she had to leave for her own safety. I smiled, sipping my coffee. People can believe whatever version makes them comfortable. But that's not what really happened. What really happened is that I learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. Best education I ever received. Mia studied my face, clearly wanting more details. She moved to Portland, completely new life, good for her. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just trusted her? I thought about Marcus in federal prison. About Lily coordinating elaborate criminal schemes while planning our wedding. About how close I'd come to marrying someone his entire relationship with me was professional manipulation. No, I said, I don't wonder about that at all. Walking home, I realized the question that had driven me through months of investigation had finally been answered. When someone you planned your future with ghosts you for their ex and thinks everything can go back to normal, you learn exactly who they really are, and then you build a better future without them. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.